On the 11th of August 2008, a Monday, Sarah Widmer, a 24-year-old dental hygienist, and her 27-year-old husband, Ryan Widmer, a sports planner, were at their home in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, United States. Sarah had just finished her work at a dental practice, and Ryan had completed his day as well. The couple, who had met through mutual friends and quickly become inseparable, enjoyed a quiet evening together. Their relationship had blossomed from a blind date at a pub to buying a house, getting married, and being in the midst of newlywed bliss, having been married for only 4 months. As they looked forward to their future, which included plans for a Costa Rica honeymoon and a vacation to Cancun, the most exciting anticipation was centered around the prospect of getting a new puppy, a venture they were actively pursuing together. On the night of August 11th, Ryan and Sarah Widmer enjoyed leftover hamburgers, corn on the cob, and cheesy potatoes while watching TV. According to Ryan, they started with some of Sarah's favorite shows before switching to a football game. Subsequently, Sarah decided to take a bath in the master bedroom's bathroom. Ryan recalled that she asked him to check the doors before he joined her upstairs. He remembered her walking upstairs after they both said, "I love you." She walks on her tippy toes, as she often did. At 10:49 p.m. that night, Ryan called 911. The call lasted 7 minutes. He told the 911 dispatcher that his wife had fallen asleep in the bathtub at their home in Morrow, Ohio. Ryan told the dispatcher, "My wife, she fell asleep in the bathtub, I think. I was downstairs. I just came up here and she was laying face down in the bathtub." Ryan explained to the dispatcher that he had been downstairs watching TV, and upon going upstairs, he discovered Sarah lying face down in the bathtub. He mentioned that she had a habit of falling asleep in the tub regularly. Following the dispatcher's instructions, Ryan undertook the process of removing Sarah from the bathtub and was guided through administering CPR. During this time, he temporarily placed the phone down as he emptied the tub and lifted Sarah, taking approximately 29 seconds. The police arrived at his residence within 6 minutes of the 911 call and found Sarah naked on the bedroom floor. Although her body felt warm and dry, her hair was wet. While attempting CPR, the police observed a pinkish-white, frothy discharge emanating from Sarah's mouth and nose, indicative of drowning. When paramedics arrived, they made 2 unsuccessful attempts to intubate Sarah in the bedroom. Subsequently, 2 more attempts were made in the ambulance during the 10-minute journey to the hospital. Despite a 5th unsuccessful intubation attempt, a 6th attempt by the emergency room physician at the hospital was eventually successful. Unfortunately, it was too late, and Sarah was pronounced dead that same night. When questioned at the hospital, Ryan informed the police that he and Sarah were alone at home that night. He mentioned watching a football game on the downstairs TV while Sarah was taking a bath at around 10 p.m. Expressing concern, he conveyed to the police that he had been afraid she might fall asleep in the tub. When asked whether Sarah had fallen asleep in the bathtub before, Ryan responded negatively, but noted that she had a tendency to fall asleep in unusual places. Despite Ryan's assertion to the police that he found Sarah in the bathtub and believed she had fallen asleep, law enforcement grew suspicious. Upon arriving at the house, they noted Sarah's body was dry, yet her hair was wet. Detectives perceived inconsistencies in Ryan's account, particularly in relation to the 911 call, where he described finding Sarah lying face down in the tub. There were doubts arising from a potential contradiction, as they believed Ryan had told a nurse at the hospital that he found her lying face up. During the search of the Widmer's residence, law enforcement noticed several discrepancies that raised additional concerns. The bathroom floor, bathroom mat, and the towel on the floor were all dry. The bathtub itself was mostly dry, with only a few droplets observed around the drain. Notably, there were no wet towels found in the house. Further inconsistencies in Ryan's narrative were uncovered by the police. Ryan had initially informed them that he was watching a Cincinnati Bengals football game on the TV downstairs while Sarah took a bath. However, upon inspection, the downstairs TV was not set to that channel. Instead, the bedroom TV was tuned to the specified channel. Additionally, police discovered bloodstains on the bedroom carpet where Sarah had been found lying on the floor when they arrived. These findings heightened suspicions and contributed to the growing list of inconsistencies in Ryan's account of the events that transpired that night. Dr. Russell Updegrove, the Warren County coroner, conducted the autopsy on Sarah. His findings revealed that Sarah's cause of death was drowning. Notably, there were several physical injuries documented during the examination, including faint bruising on the right side of her forehead, a petechial hemorrhage on the inner surface of her eyelid, bruising on the left side of her neck, a contusion on the back of her neck, an abrasion on her left armpit, and bruising and lacerations to her upper lip. Sarah exhibited deep muscle hemorrhaging in the anterior part of her neck and contusions to her scalp. Dr. Updegrove concluded that Sarah's death was a result of homicide. He expressed the opinion that the injuries Sarah sustained occurred before her death and were inconsistent with injuries typically associated with CPR procedures. The toxicology reports confirmed the absence of prohibited substances or alcohol in Sarah's system. Remarkably, on the 13th of August 2008, a mere 2 days after Sarah's death, Ryan was arrested on a charge of aggravated murder. It was the prosecution's case that Sarah died as a result of drowning. It was their case that the cause of Sarah's death was not so much as dispute, but the manner in which she died was. How did she drown? The prosecution contended that the evidence from the 911 call, the crime scene, and Sarah's injuries collectively pointed to Ryan as the perpetrator of her death. Their argument centered on the assertion that he had forcibly held her underwater, causing her to drown in the bathtub. During the investigation, the police dusted the bathtub for fingerprints and identified streak marks believed to have been created by human hands, primarily located in the middle of the tub. Employing a superglue fuming process and reflected ultraviolet imaging, they detected finger marks and smear marks. Additionally, a forearm impression was discovered on the bathtub, determined to be made by an adult male based on the testing of hair follicles. However, the timing of when the impression was made could not be ascertained. The prosecution further contended that the absence of wetness inside the bathroom was inconsistent with the scenario Ryan described. If Sarah had drowned and Ryan had pulled her out of the bathtub, the floor and other items in the bathroom should have been wet. They emphasized to the jury that when the police arrived just minutes after Ryan's 911 call, Sarah's body was dry. The prosecution pointed to the details in the 911 call, asserting that Ryan had divulged too much information and was orchestrating the call, suggesting a level of premeditation. The prosecution presented a narrative to the jury, suggesting that a violent confrontation occurred in the Widmer home on that fateful night, although the reasons behind it remained unknown. To support their case, they brought in an expert witness who testified that it was highly improbable to fall asleep and drown in a bathtub without the influence of prohibited substances or alcohol. According to this testimony, the sensation of water on the face or the triggering of the gag reflex would typically awaken an individual, and failing that, a decrease in oxygen levels would prompt the person to wake up. Coroner Updegrove, who conducted Sarah's autopsy, was called by the prosecution to provide his expert opinion on the events of that night. He testified that for Sarah to have a dry body and wet hair, a plausible explanation would involve her head being pushed over the edge of the bathtub, toilet, or sink. This act might have occurred either forwards or backward, within running water or submerged in full water. The heart of the prosecution's case was the assertion that Ryan deliberately held Sarah's head underwater until she drowned, and based on this premise, they argued that he should be found guilty of her murder. In response, the defense countered that there was a lack of evidence to support the claim that Ryan had killed Sarah. They emphasized the apparent love between the couple and argued that there was no discernible motive for Ryan to harm Sarah. According to the defense, those who knew Ryan had never witnessed him displaying anger or raising his voice. Friends of the couple attested to their happiness and shared belief that they were making plans for a positive future together. To strengthen their position, the defense conducted their own autopsy, presumably aiming to challenge or provide an alternative perspective to the findings presented by the prosecution's witnesses, particularly Coroner Updegrove. On August 15, 2008, 2 days following the initial autopsy, a second autopsy was conducted by Dr. Werner Spitz, who had been retained by the defense. Although he concurred with the conclusion that Sarah's cause of death was drowning, Dr. Spitz expressed a different opinion on the manner of death, stating he would have ruled it as undetermined. He observed various injuries, including those to her neck, arms near the crease of her elbow, upper lip, nape of her neck, scalp, a tear in her liver, and hemorrhaging to her neck. Dr. Spitz couldn't definitively ascertain whether these injuries were the result of CPR. Consequently, he asserted that he would not categorize her death as a homicide. The defense argued that if there had been a violent altercation, as suggested by the prosecution, there would have been evidence of it. Notably, the absence of injuries on both Ryan and Sarah's unbroken or chipped nails was highlighted. The defense also brought attention to the presence of female DNA found under Sarah's fingernails, with no match identified. They contended that the injuries observed on Sarah were likely a consequence of the extended CPR and multiple intubation attempts carried out that night, both inside the house, in the ambulance parked outside the house, during transport to the hospital, and at the hospital itself. The defense posited the theory that something medical, such as a seizure or cardiac ailment, could have been the underlying cause of Sarah's death. They also offered an explanation for the seemingly contradictory evidence of Sarah's dry body and wet hair, suggesting that skin dries faster than hair. In the initial trial, the jury found Ryan not guilty of aggravated murder, but convicted him of murder. However, a few months later, a new trial was ordered due to concerns raised by the defense. It was discovered that some jurors had conducted their own tests regarding the time it took them to dry after having a bath, potentially influencing their understanding of the evidence. Ryan's second trial occurred in May 2010. However, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, leading to the declaration of a mistrial. In January 2011, Ryan's third trial commenced, introducing additional evidence into the legal proceedings. The defense aimed to build a case, suggesting that Sarah may have had an undisclosed cardiovascular or neurological condition that led to a loss of consciousness, resulting in her drowning in the bathtub. To support this argument, they presented testimony from several medical experts who proposed the possibility of such an underlying medical issue. However, the state countered these assertions by calling their own medical experts to challenge and refute the defense's claims. The testimony from Sarah's co-workers provided additional insight into her health and daily routine. They recounted instances where Sarah would sleep in her car before starting work in the mornings and would also go out to her car to rest during her lunch breaks. Colleagues further revealed that she suffered from allergies and experienced headaches and stomach pains. On at least one occasion, her headaches were severe enough to cause blurred vision, prompting her to retreat to a dark room until the symptoms subsided. Dr. Benjamin Mesmer, a dentist at the practice where Sarah worked, took the stand and testified that he was present on the day Sarah died. He recalled that she complained of a headache and stomachache on that particular day. The testimony of Sarah's friends painted a picture of her tendency to fall asleep in unconventional places, such as during a game or in the middle of group conversations. The situation was significant enough that one of her friends suggested she might have narcolepsy, a sleep disorder characterized by excessive sleepiness, sleep paralysis, hallucinations, and, in some cases, episodes of cataplexy. Contrastingly, Sarah's mother, Ruth Ann Stewart, testified on behalf of the prosecution. She stated that she had never observed anything unusual about her daughter's sleep patterns. Although Sarah did experience headaches, Ruth believed they were likely the result of sinus issues. According to Ruth's testimony, she spoke to Sarah on the day she died as Sarah was heading home from work, and Sarah made no mention of having a headache. Ruth emphasized that there was no family history of seizures, heart disease, or cardiac problems. While Sarah had a heart murmur as a baby and a cleft palate, a June 2008 physical examination report did not mention the continued presence of a heart murmur. Additionally, there was no indication of any cardiac ailment, neurological defect, or disease in the report. Jennifer Cruz's testimony provided a significant and potentially damning account. According to her statements, she had contacted Ryan when he was in prison after watching a Dateline episode featuring his case. She claimed that on October 26, 2009, at 11:06 p.m., Ryan called her and confessed to killing Sarah. Jennifer testified that Ryan said, "I did it, I killed Sarah, I did it." In her testimony, Jennifer recounted that Ryan described a heated argument with Sarah in their living room, focusing on issues related to his alleged infidelity, drinking, smoking, and engagement with pornography. The argument purportedly escalated upstairs, where Sarah informed Ryan that their marriage was over. According to Jennifer, the confrontation turned physical, with Ryan allegedly stating, "Nobody leaves me. Nobody ever leaves me, and I mean nobody." Jennifer's testimony took a darker turn as she detailed Ryan's alleged admission of violence. According to Jennifer, Ryan confessed to punching Sarah in the chest during their confrontation, causing her to fall backward and hit her head. Ryan claimed to have blacked out, and upon regaining consciousness, he found Sarah on the floor, unresponsive and not breathing with wet hair. Furthermore, Jennifer asserted that during the 911 call, Ryan merely pretended to perform CPR because he was aware that Sarah was already dead, rendering resuscitation futile. Despite this shocking revelation, Jennifer continued to have conversations with Ryan after their initial discussion. It wasn't until after Ryan's second trial ended in a mistrial that she reported the incriminating conversation to the police. In response to Jennifer's testimony, the defense sought to undermine her credibility. They presented evidence regarding her past struggles with prescription drug addiction and convictions for misdemeanor theft, aiming to cast doubt on the reliability of her statements and motives. The defense presented a challenging scenario, arguing that they could not definitively explain what caused Sarah to drown that night. The defense urged the jury to consider all the facts surrounding the case and emphasized that Ryan had no apparent motive to harm Sarah. Despite these arguments, Ryan was ultimately found guilty of murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Interestingly, one of the jurors from the third trial highlighted Ryan's behavior in court as a significant factor in their guilty verdict. The juror noted that Ryan displayed no reaction when autopsy photos were presented in court, suggesting that this lack of emotional response influenced the perception of his guilt.